There's nothing I would rather do than start my new year, my 2025, than to do it with Jeff Lutz, especially because we're going to talk about the future. So, so how you doing,
Yeah.
Jeff?
Good. Happy New Year, Randy. Happy New Year to everyone else.
Yeah, so we have Elon Musk partying the night away with the President of the United States and his X, his son.
hmm
That was pretty fun. To
His mom too. Yeah.
his mom was there too. All right, so that
Yeah.
was
And Siobhan is one of the mothers of his children too. So yeah, several Musk family were there.
yeah. Well, that suggests that the bromance continues. People have been concerned that that one or the other might get too much of each other at some point, but I've suggested that I don't think so because I think they understand each other.
Yeah, there's a lot of mutual respect, and we never know what can happen in the future. But yeah, the media, I mean, is literally trying to invent narratives, and I'm sure that both of them actually appreciate it, knowing that they're both deep down some of the most I don't know, poignant trolls I've ever even encountered. Both, even, President-elect Trump and Musk are very trollish. So they actually like to even play on some of this stuff.
Right, as we've seen already. So then, speaking of trolls, we had somebody blow up a Tesla Cybertruck. Who would want to do that in front of the Trump Tower? So that seemed like a kind of a double strike.
Yeah.
Um, uh,
Yeah. It's being investigated as we're, recording this, but yeah, the confluence of, at the valet at Trump Tower, um, you know, and mortars being loaded, the police have confirmed that there's mortars loaded inside of the vehicle. Um, those are no small coincidences. Those things happening together. So it's unfortunate that there are people injured. But I'm sure between Tesla and law enforcement, they'll get to the bottom of it. They've got unbelievable analytics and the ability to really understand what happened. And if you're a terrorist, like the last vehicle on Earth you would want to put explosives inside of is a Cybertruck because of, and Elon explained this online, the structural membrane is stainless and a very, very hard stainless. And so, yeah, you can see after post explosion, the whole frame is intact, which means that, the explosives were loaded inside of the vehicle. The vehicle actually prevented the blast from being much, much worse.
yeah. So that, and of course, the Sentry system, which would be able to pick up all the activity around the vehicle, and find out as much as possible. The black box, I guess, should be able to give us some information as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Let them get to the bottom of it. It's unfortunate. But we'll let them get to the bottom of it.
On a much more positive note, Elon has been, let's say that I have had a very, very good day on X because of Elon's statement about a tsunami coming at the end of next year. And one of my posts on X today has absolutely, I hate to use the word blown up, but anyway, has gone very, very crazy. So, what do you think that Elon was talking about in terms of the tsunami coming at the end of 2025?
Yeah. I think it's going to be a convergence of things that are related to autonomy that will be either in production or available for sale and use. And there'll probably even be a third bucket of things that are prototyping in Tesla factories like Optimus bots. But I think people are going to be able to start putting two and two together when you can hail an unsupervised Tesla robo-taxi. And if the smart analysts are going to, put pen to paper and realize that the cost of capital and the cost of entry of Tesla doing this is going to be prohibitively lower than others, but with far-reaching scale and with a much, much greater slope of scale. And it's going to be really disruptive because the cost per ride once the system is at near utilization is going to be you're it's going to be hard to not want to select a Tesla for a ride share because the costs are going to be so much lower. It's one of those things where Tesla came in and did it structurally differently again, and nobody else can beat it. And there's so many countless examples of what they did, in the past with their various versions of their EVs, where it takes others a couple of years to catch up. In this situation, I think it I don't know if some are, but most are not going to be able to catch up. I think there will certainly be competitors everywhere Tesla has these products, but there are going to be very few companies that can capture the margin share that Tesla can capture. And what I mean by margin share is, when Tesla builds, well, first off, when Tesla builds the vehicle, they tucked in about $1,200 of inference and autonomy and cameras and recognition inside of the vehicle. Probably the smallest cost structure for an AI inference edge device out there. And then they put 10 million of them out there by the time that the service rolls out. And then, you look at their approach to whether it's Optimus or whatever the case is they not only will be there in volume, but they will be there from a gross margin perspective. And there's something structurally different about Tesla's approach. I think the people that are interested in the name should understand. And it's not just the word vertical integration, but it's what it means to unit economics. Because you could go a distributed route and you could still be a highly successful company. I look at companies like Apple, for example. People used to refer to them as vertically integrated. They are not vertically integrated. They don't own their own factories. They work with contract manufacturers. Those contract manufacturers make some of the components, but then they have a lot of inbound components. But there's something different structurally with Tesla, which is if the piece part has a competitive attribute to it, where either others don't know how to do it or suppliers can't do it at scale, then they take it on themselves. And they have the ability to take it on themselves. They've been hiring this engineering talent in Elon's likeness for the last 15 years. So, I mean, this could be a long form conversation, or it could be very quick. And I think the tsunami piece of it is, not only are these things going to launch, but they're going to be difficult to catch up to from a business model perspective because of the way Tesla approached the problem. If I look at things like, and I don't want to pick on one company, but some of the other bot companies, it is a sum of many parts from many different companies, because those individual I call them integrators, the one that actually slaps their logo on at the end, they don't have the ability to do their own inference silicon. They don't have the ability to do most of their own layer one software. They don't have the ability. Some of them don't have their own. Most of them don't have their own manufacturing. There's a lot of things that they just don't have. And when you don't have it, then you have to go buy it. And if you have to go buy it, the person you're buying it from may be adept in doing the task at a lower cost than what they would have been able to do it at, but they're still going to charge them a margin. And that's where this becomes structurally difficult, I think, for others to compete. And so when I enter into these conversations, and I have some debates on X with some folks sometimes, especially some analysts, I'm surprised at how often the business model doesn't come up. And I'm surprised that people just simply look at, well, there's a Cruise or this or via Waymo or this picked me up or that they must be okay. No, they're not. And some of these companies will fund a losing business model for north of a decade or more. So yeah, when he says tsunami, it's not only that they're going to be out there at scale, but they're going to have a business model that with it, and I think that's the fundamental difference.
Okay, so as long as we're on that subject, let's go ahead and go into the subject I most wanted to address today, because I've been having discussions and debates back and forth, both on X and on my channel, with people who think it's going to take a very, very, very long time to ramp up the Optimus once they have their so-called final version. I know there's a word for it. I know I've even heard you use it. Uh, uh, uh,
Start of production, or
start of production, but I mean the model that they have agreed to, like on a car model, they'll say, okay, this is the one. Now we can go ahead and start tooling the final tooling to do this.
yeah, usually it's design lock, but then there's
Design
a
lock.
whole design phase.
Yeah.
Yeah, then there's a whole, we don't know if Tesla's at, I think they're at design lock, but um that would be an interesting thing for them to actually announce, because they announced that on the Cybertruck. I think in May of 2022. I think Elon did that in her interview and said we're done
Right.
designing this thing. And then that time between May of 2022 and December and November of 2023 were the engineering design phases to take that lock design. That's the lock design is the handshake. There's two lock designs in a product development model. The first lock design is where the industrial design team, the Franz team, and then the engineering team, the Lars team, they shake hands on, okay, it's going to look like this. It's going to have these exact dimensions. This is where we're putting stuff. This is how stuff goes in. From an engineering perspective, stuff goes here. Manufacturing, design for manufacturability is in that loop as well. And those were a lot of the functions I used to lead. And I would have a seat at that table. And not only, and you're not there to approve anything per se, you're actually there to enable,
Mm-hmm.
the state of the art, the best in class, the next best thing, the lowest cost structure. You're there. Everybody should be there in an enabling mode, not in a blocking mode. But that first design lock is the handshake of the industrial design and then the initial engineering and manufacturing kind of head nod of like, we think we can do this. And then once you get past that, but those aren't part numbers that suppliers can go make. That's just an agreed to lock. And then what engineering does with manufacturing and supply chain is they'll release an initial set of tools and say, all right, I need X number of weeks or a couple of months to do my detailed design work, and then we're going to go work with suppliers. We're going to do DFM with suppliers, do a handshake. We're going to release those first set of tools, and then we're going to do a first build. And that build is usually, you know, a lot of production tooled parts, but it's not the final version of them. And then you go through this engineering iteration phase of you build your first prototype, you shove them into reliability, you shove them into user testing, unit testing, you do all the things, and then you're like, while you're getting these test results flowing in, you're already doing your design. The design teams, the engineering teams, doing their designs for the next release, and then they release. And in Silicon Valley, and I helped develop these phases initially with Motorola. But there's these three phases of engineering validation, then there's design validation, and then there's final proto validation or product validation. They're called EVT, PVT, and DVT. Sorry, EVT, DVT, PVT. And then you go into full mass production in the auto industry and the consumer electronics. It's called startup production, SOP. So where I think so there's that's that first design lock. You release tools, you do prototype iterations, you do maybe three or four large iterations, but and then there's some many ones of smaller changes, and then when you get into design validation DVT, you should be getting to 100% of production tool parts. And that's the first time you see everything coming off of a production tool. And the intent is for that to be able to be production worthy. And what the factory will do is they'll actually fabricate the first production line. Because before you've been working on NPI lines, you've been working on smaller lines. And the factory would have produced their first one or two production lines for DVT. And then you do those builds. And then basically you're just doing the final tweaks. These should be sub 1 month in duration, minor tweaks to tools to get things dimensionally where you want them, CPKs centered. This is where you're trying to statistically get the parts from a dimensional perspective to be as centered as possible. But I'm droning on. In general, there's these two handshakes, the engineering industrial design handshake. And at the end, the real design lock is when suppliers are told, start your engines. And you can go into production. And then all the trains, this is where you hear about the trains getting all coordinated. Because in a car, there's probably 10,000 parts that have to be coordinated. Some of those parts are inside of Tesla, some of those are outside of Tesla. But someone's got to actually coordinate all those trains because they all have to arrive at various time phases to be subassembled and built. So, so for Optimus, so that's how it works. I think I hope they're at the first handshake. I hope with that final arm and the final 22 degrees of freedom, and then them figuring out when I saw them put it onto an Optimus. See, when I was at the We Robot event, it was just on it was on some sort of pedestal. And when I saw it a month or two later, I think 6 weeks later, put onto an Optimus, I felt that to me was a maturity milestone right there of like, okay, they integrated it into Optimus. That's a real prototype. So they may be at that point of that first handshake, and then they have to do these engineering iterations. Now, to answer I will on a little bit more of the bullish side. When you're doing these, especially when you get to DVT and PVT, you could build a couple thousand of them during that time frame. There's no rule against that. You can do whatever you want. At the end of the day, you don't want to waste money as a company, and these prototypes are expensive. But when you're at the DVT and PVT phase, they're production tooled parts, but they're off of very low volume operations, so they're very expensive as well. They basically just squirted out 500 or 1,000 for they weren't a continuous peak operation. So for Optimus, I feel like they've done that first handshake, and I feel they're in this iteration mode. And for me, them getting a couple of thousand Optimus built in calendar year of 2025 and getting them to progressive workloads inside of the Tesla factories is not beyond the realm for me, in my opinion. And then they will use that factory feedback as a loop, another loop of should we make any more changes before we lock and tell suppliers to go.
Okay, so Elon's conversation saying that he thought they would build 1,000 or so. And then I think one of the other execs came back later and said a couple of 3,000. So they're talking the same kind of language, a few thousand.
Yeah,
So
that's doable
to build those next year is doable.
this year.
I'm sorry, 2025, we're there now. To do
Here,
to do that, we're
the year of
here.
Optimus, the
Here we
year of
go.
unsupervised too.
Man, I tell you, it's going to be crazy. Anyway, so we have this year where we could do that. Those can be put out into the factory and or I still believe they'll send it out to a couple of customers like a Pepsi or something like that, where they might be using them so they can start to integrate with another team so they can learn what that is, what's necessary in terms of the socialization, the training of another team outside of the
Yeah,
Tesla
maybe.
world. I think that would be a smart thing to do. Don't know if they're planning to do that, but it seems like that would be smart. So getting that part, and I think that most of the people I'm debating with believe that will happen, that 2 to 3,000 next year or whatever, 1 to 3,000 next year.
This year. I'm gonna keep catching
Okay,
you, Randy. It's okay.
okay.
That's why we're co-hosting.
That'll happen in 2025. Here's the rub. So we get that done. Let's say that these are doing well. I'm expecting Tesla to do well with that work that they're going to do this year. So Elon says we're going to start selling them in 2026. If they're going to start selling them, I'm assuming they're going to do it off a production line, not a
Yeah,
pre-production line or anything else. It's going to be a production line. And you and I have had this conversation before, but I'm asking you to restate it as clearly as possible. I'm thinking that given the number of parts, I think you called it the density of the parts, given the weight of the parts, given the lack of complexity of the equipment necessary, like no big stamping machines or, massive arms that have to move things from place to place, or a big building on 3 levels that in order to assemble things. Given that it's less complex in those regards, that it should ramp faster than a car next in 2026, next year.
It's a good question. It should. It depends. This is the only. Here's what's different: is cars have been in production for over 100 years.
Mhm.
Humanoid robots have not. So when you're building a new category, sometimes you don't want to get too far over your skis in the early ramp. Where if you find something that's fundamental, let's say they find something relating to current drain that they missed, or something, fundamental that they missed regarding liquid ingress protection. I'm just making up a couple of things. You wouldn't want too many of them out there. But I think that's what they're doing the couple thousand this year for. But the couple thousand this year are only going to give you the kind of resolution on failure rate. Um, it's only going to give you so much. So the answer is from a excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. The answer is from a physics perspective, yeah, it can ramp faster. The volumetric density thing is a more difficult thing with Optimus than a vehicle, meaning you're putting a lot of more components in a smaller area. But that's more of the engineering challenge, and that's the DFM challenge to solve before production. And once you figure it out in production, it should go together, quicker than a car for sure. So yeah, I it's really going to be how far does Tesla want to go on this first version of the bot too. That's the other thing. Pay close attention if they kind of refer to this Optimus as like some sort of like Optimus version 1 or something, because then they're working on Optimus version 2, which I would safe to say that that's a no-brainer slam dunk. But you don't want to overburden and overload your look how carefully they're managing this Model Y transition, because if they mismanage that Model Y transition, that would be enterprise risk to their company. They have probably $12 billion of material on order or in process in their own factories at any point in time for Model Y. And if you don't take that inventory down to zero, if you don't manage that transition properly, you could have a multi-billion-dollar problem on your hands. And that's just not how Tesla operates. They are one of the best companies at managing inventory, changeovers, cutovers, and they do both sides of it. They keep the inventory low, but they're also very quick at doing the introductions of new parts into the factory to reduce cost. It's mind-blowing. But in general, I agree that it can ramp faster. The question is going to be is what are the unknown issues at the time? And does Tesla have a new version of the bot where they only want to do 100,000 of the first one? So that's the only thing to keep in mind. But yeah, year one, you're, like the Cybertruck, you're not going to get hundreds of thousands in that first year. But you should be able to get tens of thousands for sure.
All right. So, I mean, the Cybertruck, we don't know the final number yet, but we've all been guessing that it would be in the 60 to 90,000 range. And that seems to be what it's going to turn out to be. And I think other ramps of the cars have been a little faster. So just as a maybe a range for Optimus in 2026 of 50 to 100,000 would not be shocking.
Yeah, I would take that number down more to, you know, 25, maybe on the lower end, but yeah, they should be able to they should be able to they should be able to get that up and going.
So then let's go to that next year, the 2027 year. So this is where a lot of the discussion breaks down. even though there are some that don't even think that 2026 will be that good. But 2027, Brett Adcock, a bunch of other people have talked about this 10xing per year. I don't know where that comes from because, again, it would seem like it would be totally industry specific. In my water bottle business, if I'd made a million, if I'd made 100,000 in one year, if I chose to, I could make 25 million the next year. It wouldn't have been a big deal. Just blow mold more and injection mold more. It's pretty much, it's not, you're not really going to run into that many problems. But going from 100,000, let's say they do 50 to 100,000 the first year, going to a million the second year, would that be considered, I mean, assuming everything went well, we're not talking about massive recalls or, running into big issues in the field, but they've got the orders. They've they've done a good job the first year. Product is working well. Going to a million the second year, a problem in your view?
Yeah, the more so no, I mean, is it solvable by the Tesla team? Yes. But is it trivial? No. Because in when you're building something, I view these Optimus as like larger mechanical parts, but a smartphone or a tablet with a lot more mechanical complexity. And when you add that added complexity, when you have that computer inside, you're going to have to start sourcing from more and more sources, more and more fabs, and then you have to qualify those fabs. So it's going to be a question of the supply chain design ultimately. And are they going to do a lot of this work up front? See, this is the thing that could be really good for Tesla. It's because they have a bunch of AI challenges to solve before these things are really useful in a factory. So this isn't like anything else before where, you know, take a smartphone, for example, or something else where the infrastructure that it's shipping into is already kind of a known thing. And if you wanted to do 10 million, you could do 10 million. There's capacity for it for people to take it. But in the case of Optimus, they could use this time over the next year to really work on the supply base in the background and getting it revved up for much, much bigger volumes. This is why Elon is having these conversations with TSMC senior executives, Samsung senior executives. You see him because this isn't going to be, he's transforming his business. Now he's making a cyber cab and he's making a set of vehicles that will be themselves the volume of the entire product line before that. So he's got to go out to his partners and say, I need you to expand on my behalf. Tell me what you need from me. But then when you get to Optimus, the numbers get so nutty that not only are you asking for capacity, but you're also you have a different supply chain team. You're actually going out there and helping invent the capacity or helping figure out how to solve bottlenecks that don't exist at 500,000 or a million units a year, but exist at 10 million units a year. So what I'd say, what's nice about Optimus is they have this massive real world AI challenge that they have to solve. So while they're solving that, there's no reason why the supply chain team can't be in there solving, so this thing is more multi-sourced at launched, more, ready for significant scale. That's easier said than done. Usually when you're trying to get the first couple of thousand units in starter production, you're really focused on, am I building this thing right? Did the suppliers give me product in spec? Did my engineering assumptions come to fruition? And you're really focused on it. You're not really focused on, I need to get the third and fourth fab up on the AI5 chip. You're just not. And you don't have the people. Right. They're focused on getting the first couple thousand out. But I think there's something special here where Tesla can use that time to really expand. So I'm actually bullish. I think it's going to be difficult, but I do think that Tesla is uniquely positioned to scale Optimus. No one else is. So this is my Optimus elevator speech for Tesla is it's like and it's almost the same thing for autonomy, but just for just Optimus in general. Nobody, if you think of it like an AND gate, and like in digital logic, an AND gate, both of the inputs have to be true in order for the output to be true, so in digital logic, so it's an AND gate. And in this AND gate for Optimus, You have to have the AI brain, and then you have to have the manufacturing capability. And I don't know of another company that has both inputs of that flip to true
Right.
or flip to one, and would where the output would be a one. And I think this is why Tesla succeeds at that. Just that using that example.
All right. So we've got you on this prediction loop right now. Do you have any personal predictions of things that you're passionate about for 2025 on any subject, anything from Tesla related products, other Elon related products, or the world at large?
Well, I know S&P Mobility came out with about a 30 a significant growth in EV adoption. I don't want to quote the exact number here, but I encourage
30%.
listeners to go look.
30%.
Yeah, yeah, that's a you know that's a big number. It's a big growth number. So I'm optimistic about that. I'm optimistic about that continuing, and I think Tesla's uniquely situated to be able to take advantage of that.
One of the questions I've asked, maybe I've even asked you before, once we have unsupervised FSD, 100% unsupervised, Elon says, we're going to cover the insurance. Maybe he gets in the back seat of the car and takes a drive around town. Um, uh, Once we have that, I'm expecting the sales of the vehicles themselves to be they won't be able to keep up. We'll be back to 3 month waiting times.
Yeah, and this is where retail will be ahead of these things before others. Because I hear this insurance data point come up, but by using FSD, my insurance came down the cost of FSD. Or said differently, my insurance is half of what it would be if I were to competitively buy insurance on the outside.
Right.
So without Tesla actually, and Tesla does this a lot. They do something and they don't explicitly advertise that they're doing it, and then it just becomes part of their business model. And so, in my situation, I have two vehicles that would have been, $400 a month combined to insure that I'm insuring for $200 a month. So I feel like Tesla is paying at least for half of my insurance, or they're paying for all of my FSD. It depends what I choose. So this bundle thing may be happening already. But yeah, I think your question was around demand once we go to unsupervised. Yeah, I think it's going to be well. First off, you're going to open up different sources of demand too, because you're now going to have people that want vehicles to be able to actually exercise the business model and
Right.
provide rides. So you're going to have these fleets, and then you're going to have people that also are going to be people that could have never driven before, or people that just want this capability. And when they see it, like in my example, when I see the cost of FSD and the cost of my insurance, and I saw my insurance come down as my FSD score went from 90 to 100, I'm I'm going to buy it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's kind of what I'm seeing out there is that I just really, as marketing, of course, is my home, and it just feels as if once you can tell people, once it's no longer, hey, come and try out my FSD, and then you've got a lump in your throat because you're afraid it may not quite perform to where it's like, I'm
Yeah.
going to get in the back seat while we do this. It's
By
going
the
to
way, Randy,
change
that
the
you and
story.
I are on the same page when we tend to agree we're bulls on this. There's a whole other contingent that says FSD is not really a big thing and consumers aren't going to, there isn't. So there's a whole cast of analysts and doubters that like this isn't a bit like the car driving itself on all over the world is not a big thing. And I question that because I actually think that it's going to look really silly if you put yourself 5 years from now that people will be able to buy cars at a cheaper or equivalent value that drive themselves, and there will be ones that don't. I find that silly to think that that's actually not a big impact. But I think your listeners, everybody should be aware of there is a large contingent of people that think that the impact of full self driving is not a big deal. And many of those people, the last ride they took was on 12.3 or on 12.1 or something,
Right.
or they took one ride on 13. And it's not like for me, it's the default. Now I get in the car I say where I want to go, and I press the one button, and I go. That is my default operation now. 1 year ago on V11, I would use FSD probably 30% of the time, 1 in 3 times.
Yeah.
And then probably in 12.5 and greater when the NAG was eliminated, I got to about 70%. But yeah, there's a whole contingent that believe that that we are overweighting. Well, time will tell.
Well, I think there's a certain percentage of people, and I think most of them are probably over 40 years of age, who grew up in the car culture, who wanted to have the fast car, the really cool looking car as a chick magnet. They like putting their foot in it. All of those things apply to me.
Yeah,
I drove convertibles and Jaguars, and I mean, I loved that thing. I until 9 months ago, I was still driving a 300 horsepower, dual, what do you call it? Anyway, the Volvo, with a
yeah.
4.5 second 0 to 60. So I've always loved that part of the car culture. And I get the idea that many people might have, oh, I don't want to give up
And there
driving.
will be those people. Yeah.
I have a feeling they go away. I don't think it'll take very long before people go, yeah, but I could sit here and play a video game or talk or watch the scenery. Just watching the scenery changes your ride. I noticed that in the very beginning when we first got the Tesla is when I was just using the ADA, I was able to watch the scenery much more than I could if I didn't have that. So I think it will change pretty rapidly.
Yeah, we're not even talking about the other side of regulatory, which is when this becomes so good, our government's going to mandate
Yeah.
that your cars have, just like they mandate your cars need a seatbelt to prevent, severe injury and airbags. Are they going to mandate computer vision system that, has the capability and performance of Teslas to prevent accidents? Is it going to get so good? Like we're all worried about the regulatory side of like how is this ever going to get approved? How is it ever going to get over the hump? But what happens when we're on like when the training data and we're on version 14 or what? I'm just making it up, or we've
Yeah.
gone through Colossus or sorry, the Cortex is now 200,000 GPUs and we're doing these massive training runs and these edge cases are gone. And what happens when government starts saying, I want this. I don't want the 40,000 deaths, on the road where people aren't able to, see their family the next morning. I don't want that anymore. I want this mandated where this is on. So we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but I do think this converges, to that point and it becomes crystal clear. And that's what's interesting about all the things in the Tesla portfolio that they're working on is there's like on a surface level, you can kind of look at humanoids and say, oh my God, humanoid bots are going to replace labor
Right.
and this is going to be a big thing. And it is. It's mind blowing. You can't even like, it's hard to put, I've seen certain, put numbers to it. But what if all of a sudden you start saying, well, oh my God, it's going to start replacing some of the capex that was in the factory as well.
Right.
And those billions of dollars. I don't hear people talking about that. What happens when they become coherent, when that manufacturing line becomes coherent, and now what's happening 100 meters away from the bot at station 1 to the bot at station 37, now they're coherent and like, hey, you're over torquing screws, and all of a sudden there's an immediate correction, and the parametric performance improves in seconds on the next units coming on the line. We don't have that ability today right now. There's some interesting things that are being done to do that manually, but we don't have it like that, like what Optimus will be able to do. What happens when Optimus comes in and it starts reconfiguring material flows and line designs so they're more like the possibilities become endless. And I know it sounds like we're just kind of fanboying on, but those are real things that it should be able to do once it's at scale. But all the conversations are really at a surface level of about bots picking something up from a tray and putting it in here or plugging in this cable or doing whatever. But the stuff behind it is immense transformational value, unbelievable value.
I just did a whole video on that the other day. I don't know if you caught it, but I talked about even things like material flow. You've got the upstream, you got the downstream. the Optimus being able to communicate wirelessly with other Optimus or whatever up and down the stream of saying, I'm almost out of material or my material is coming to you, all of that really will dramatically increase the productivity of any, not even just
Yeah.
a line, but rather of a complete system within a factory, even as something as simple as my silly bottle company. But my
Hmm.
silly bottle company, it was a nice little bottle company. But anyway,
Where you, it's where you learn the basics of building anything. Yeah.
that's right. Okay,
Yeah.
so we had a big blow off on the market. Everybody was expecting a Santa Claus rally, but instead, what we got was 4 days of gloom and doom and negative and red, and including on Tesla stock. I put out some polling, and the polling said that people were actually not at all concerned about the reduction in the Tesla values. I mean, some people were sad and glad. What do you think happens though going forward? All the polls, the consumer polls, the small business polls, the big business polls, the punditry polls, all of them say very little chance of recession in 2025. A lot of optimism going into 2025. So it was this all window dressing and profit taking. And tomorrow morning we start with people that are looking for bargains.
Yeah. I it's really hard to analyze what goes on in the daily movements of the stock market. The only thing you can take away on a holiday week is very low volumes, and which I don't understand why, by the way, like if most of this is algorithmic trading, like the algos don't open presents and have Hanukkah celebrations. So I don't get that part of it, but the volumes were significantly lower throughout the week. So I don't pay too much attention to it. I do think that there's definitely, when you have a run up like that Tesla had, it's not uncommon for some of that to come out when there's a next come off before a next like significant announcement. And in P&D, we make a bigger deal about P&D than what it really is to the company. It's important to the company. I mean, they need to grow volumes. They need to throw off cash to fund this AI build out. So that part of it is important. And then the more units they get out there that have Tesla inference in them, the better. So those parts of it are all important, but that's not why people are like crowding around the P&D number. They're crowding around the P&D number because Elon said this, and
Right.
this is what, flat growth would be. And, FactSet said this. And if you look at the people inside of, FactSet or the Bloomberg terminal, it's this clown that had an $85 price target 2 weeks ago that now changes it to $380. And we're supposed to get all wound up because he thinks that there's 508,000 Teslas going to be built. Who cares? But unfortunately, the market, the algos are all trained to look at these things. So, you know, but I think it depends on your time horizon too. Like if you're worried about daily movements and if you're trading, if your position in Tesla is purely trading, then you're looking at this number. But if you're mostly kind of an investor, you're really looking at these. You're not looking at the every 90-day hamster wheel. You're looking at getting the FSD unsupervised. So you're waiting for an FSD license announcement, which should be imminent. You're waiting for a reveal of the Model Y, the next Model Y, which is the number one selling car in the world, and then Tesla's going to make it better. You're waiting for them to release these new affordable vehicles. You're waiting for FSD unsupervised. You're waiting for Optimus to go into the factory. Like these are the things that are going to take the stock to me to 600, 700, 800, into those higher numbers, not this 90-day hamster wheel. Now, if they put up 450K units in the quarter, I think we're going to get a bad reaction.
Yeah, right.
Um, I think we're going to get some bizarre reaction, viable reaction if it's 505 and and the consensus was 507. You're going to get some sort of bizarre reaction. But if they put some number up like 515 or 520, I think everybody kind of shuts up. I think the buying continues and then we move on. And then you're going into earnings. I think the energy number is a little bit important too. That number's it'll be an interesting one to watch. But I'll be interested at the earnings print in January, what they say about the affordable vehicles. And quite frankly, I'm expecting either this week or next that they announce a new vehicle because of the inventory, the massive inventory drawdown they did in
Legitimate.
Q4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. In fact, I was expecting it today, but so far we don't have
By
the.
the way, Tesla I can't begin to stress to people, nobody manages excess obsolescence, which in a unit economic stack could kill your gross margins. This is buying too much material of one version or building too many units and putting them into inventory. Nobody does this better at minimizing that than Tesla. I'm telling you, it's one of the reasons they have, the balance sheet that they have.
All right,
It's unbelievable.
my last thought of the day is that Diamandis just said a little while ago that 2025, I'm paraphrasing him, will be an unbelievable year for tech breakthroughs. And in my show later tonight, Brian Wang will say exactly the same thing. What do you think? I'm thinking that it's just going to be mind-bending what's going to happen in 2025.
Well, we're supposed to get agents in, AI this year. We're supposed to get self-driving, unsupervised Teslas later this year. So that's going to be interesting because I think a lot of the language model based AI has underwhelmed. AI PCs are not selling.
Yeah.
The mobile phone unit is not necessarily, smartphone is not necessarily taking off with all this AI capability. And this is all publicly reported information I'm referring to, by the way. And so the only thing I think that's actually working and doing meaningful things for people is the real world AI stuff. So if these agents come out, now you have AIs working with each other and they're, then I think that could be a very special thing. Tesla's driving themselves at their price point will be a very special thing from a tech perspective. But man, there's been a lot of stuff that's been put out there. I won't name the companies, but the goggles that go over your head and some of the other things that have really just underwhelmed as well. So, but yeah, I mean, everybody's got their compute, so everybody should be able to be put it to better use.
Yeah.
This is where Tesla excels. They get their compute up faster. They engineer. They work. They're making more progress more quickly. I don't know how else to say it. They're hustling, and it's really, the paperclip thing, the Copilot thing is just there's the inherent power in that versus what you have with version 13.2 in Tesla. There's just night and day.
In addition to those more obvious ones, we have the SpaceX probably going to be catching both halves of the
Yeah,
Starship, putting up the bigger satellites. You've got what do you call it? Neural
Neuralink,
Neuralink with I think they're planning to put in at least 12. Is that the number this year? At least 12 in 2025, I think.
much higher volume number. Yeah.
And the next year, a lot. I mean, a couple of hundred, I think, the following year.
And you'll see humanoids. You'll see more
The humanoids, of course.
humanoids. You'll see China. You'll see China do a lot of stuff for show. And the question is like, is there something really behind it? But I think you'll see Tesla meaningfully deploy them in the factory but towards the end part of the year. I'm telling you, I was stunned by the incline walking on the hill and with the tennis ball catch. And that for me unlocked because I was kind of a little bit of all right, these things are going to be picking up panels in the factory and doing odds, picking up battery cells. Great. There's these big objects and you can grip it. That's fine. But when I saw the motor skills involved to do the tennis ball and I see the reaction time of like, walking, I just like, yeah, I'm very bullish on what this can do. And now we have Elon next to the White House. That's the other thing. Tesla could have been doing all this innovation, pushing all this stuff forward, and then you could have these false prophets on the other side that are just blocking it or lawfaring for the sake of lawfaring because their politics are different than someone else. But now you've got this alignment in Washington, D.C., and it's not fully aligned. I don't think people should be
Yeah, yeah.
jumping, but certainly aligned between Elon and the White House. And he certainly carries significant weight on Capitol Hill. Significant. They can complain about him all they want, but he has the money, he has the reach to primary or so. I just when I think about it in context of we need AI regulation. We need autonomy, a federal autonomy or framework regulation. Number two. Number three, we need a thoughtful approach to humanoids and the introduction to humanoids in our workforce. And how do you do this without having people go to the streets and start protesting? And having him in that proximity to the White House to kind of figure out how to usher in this transition, I don't think you could ask for any that. That's to me, I think some people on Wall Street are putting those two things together and saying like, there's a put under, like the Fed put. You talk about the Fed put. There's a put under Tesla now
All
in a
right,
good way.
Jeff. All right, Jeff. Well, I think that gets me where I wanted to go. I wanted you to say that it was going to be easy to ramp to 100,000 and a million. I didn't quite get that out of you, but maybe next time.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy, but there will be nobody that can do a product like Optimus with its capability and AI brain at volume than Tesla. You'll see a bunch of stuff from a bunch of other people, but a lot of that stuff will fizzle out. Just like a lot of the Chinese EV
Art.
manufacturers, 80% of them have failed already. You'll see that with the bots as well.
All right. Thank you as always, being my first co-host of 2025. That's a very special thing. And
That's a big distinction. Thank you.
and
Thank you for honoring me with that.
we'll look forward to seeing you next week. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the numbers. I'll let you move on with the rest of your New Year's Day.
Take care, everyone. Happy New Year.
It turns out there is no pre-market, so I'm just going to say Happy New Year to you. Thank you for following. Thank you for being behind this channel all year. Thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you for hitting like from time to time. That's very kind of you. Thank you if you've joined Patreon. Thank you. There's a 100 or 200 people, I don't know, between 100 and 200 people that have joined Patreon. I thank you guys for the ongoing support, and I could certainly use some more of that. Thank you for the folks that have been buying up those Cybertruck bottle openers. It was a very good Christmas, and it's continued. I had more just yesterday. And be sure and look at the video from this morning. There's a post on X right now that has gone viral. You might want to take a look at that. If you haven't been following me on X, you might want to follow me on X. I'll put the card up from this morning's show. And then later on tonight, Brian Wang at 7:45. It is fabulous. It has already been produced. I can tell you, do not miss Brian Wang at 7:45 tonight. You'll love every single minute of it. All right, with all that said, it has been great talking to you.